As I walked through the park, the sun shining down on my new life, I couldn't help but feel a sense of peace. The sounds of laughter from children playing nearby filled the air, reminding me of the joy I had found after so much turmoil. At 30, I had fought through the heartache of my past and emerged stronger. I had a beautiful baby girl, a miracle I had longed for, and life was finally starting to make sense. Or so I thought. Just 4 days ago, everything changed in a heartbeat. Strolling with my daughter, I felt the warmth of the sun on my skin, and I inhaled the fresh, crisp air. My baby girl, Emma, was snug in her stroller, her little fingers grasping the edge of a blanket. She was the light of my life, a precious gift I had fought hard to bring into the world. It was a beautiful day, and I was grateful for every moment I had with her. As I walked along the path, lost in my thoughts, I suddenly saw them, my parents, standing a few paces away, looking as shocked as I was. The sight of them sent a jolt of anxiety through me. It had been nearly 3 years since I had last seen my parents or spoken to them. I had made every effort to sever ties after they turned their backs on me during one of the darkest times in my life. We were no longer a family. They had chosen to abandon me when I needed them the most. My heart raced as I tried to process what was happening. They were accompanied by Scott, my ex-husband. The man who had once been my partner, who had once held my hand through life's challenges, had become just another painful memory. Now he stood before me, looking different but still somehow familiar. A knot formed in my stomach as I realized this unexpected reunion would dredge up everything I had worked so hard to bury. They must have come to see his aunt, who had recently moved to this neighborhood. A part of me wondered if they had sought me out deliberately, or if this was just an unfortunate coincidence. Regardless, I couldn't bring myself to move. Instead, I stood frozen, grappling with a whirlwind of emotions. "Is that?" My mother's voice broke the silence, her eyes widening at the sight of my daughter. "A baby?" There was a flicker of confusion, a hint of disbelief that quickly morphed into something I recognized all too well: expectation. "Yes," I replied, my voice steady despite the tumult inside. "Her name is Emma." How did this happen?" Scott asked, stepping closer, his eyes searching mine. I could see the hope in his gaze, the belief that somehow we could reclaim what we had lost. "It's a long story," I said, choosing my words carefully. I didn't owe him an explanation, but a part of me wanted him to know that I was thriving despite their absence. Then came the questions, one after another, as they crowded around my stroller, their eyes darting from me to Emma. They wanted to know everything: how I had managed to have a child after being labeled infertile, why I hadn't reached out to them, and, more importantly, if I was willing to reconnect. It was surreal to hear my mother, who had once dismissed my feelings, suddenly express interest in my life. I could see the wheels turning in her mind, calculating how this baby could potentially heal our fractured relationship. "Do you want to come back home?" she asked, her tone almost pleading. "We've missed you so much." "Home?" I echoed, the word bitter on my tongue. "You abandoned me when I needed you the most. You treated me like I was worthless because I couldn't give you grandchildren. What makes you think I'd ever want to go back to that?" They exchanged uneasy glances, but I could see their desperation growing. My father cleared his throat, trying to regain control of the conversation. "We're sorry about how things went down, but we're here now. We want to be part of your life again." "Part of my life?" I repeated, incredulous. "Is that why you're here? Because I have a baby now?" Scott nodded, his expression hopeful. "I've been thinking about you a lot lately. Maybe this is a sign we should try again. We had something special, and I miss that. I miss you." Don't you dare stand there and act like you care, I snapped, anger surging through me. You left me when I was at my lowest. You chose my parents over me. You don't get to waltz back into my life because I've had a baby. I'm not just a vessel for your expectations. Their faces fell, and I could see the shock in their eyes. I had always been the quiet, obedient daughter. I had spent my life trying to win their approval, but now, all that bottled up resentment spilled over. Do you even understand how it feels to be reduced to your ability to have children? I continued, my voice rising. You all treated me like I was nothing more than a disappointment, because I couldn't fulfill your dreams of grandchildren. Now you want to act like everything's okay because I finally have a child? You're sickening. The words hung in the air, heavy with years of pain and resentment. I could feel my pulse racing, the adrenaline pumping through my veins. I was furious, and for the first time, I was standing up for myself. As I turned to leave, my mother called out, "Wait, can't we talk this over? We've missed you so much. We want to make things right." Missed me? I shot back, my heart racing. You didn't even care enough to check on me when I was falling apart. You treated me like a burden, and now you want me to just forgive and forget? No, this is not how it works. With those words, I fled back to my apartment, my heart pounding in my chest. I slammed the door behind me, feeling both exhilarated and shattered. I had finally confronted them, but the adrenaline soon faded, leaving me feeling sick. I curled up on the couch, clutching Emma to my chest as if she were a shield against the world. For the next few days, I stayed home, paralyzed by the weight of that encounter. I had tried to move on, to create a new life away from the shadows of my past, but now everything felt like it was crashing down around me. I replayed the scene over and over in my head, wishing I had handled it differently, but deep down, I knew I had said what needed to be said. Just when I thought I had escaped them, I received a call from an unknown number. I typically ignored calls from unfamiliar numbers, but something compelled me to answer. "Hello?" I said cautiously, holding my breath. "Hey, it's Scott," came his voice, and behind him, I could hear my parents whispering, clearly intending for me to hear them. "They're here with me. We wanted to talk about what happened." "Why would I want to talk to you?" I snapped, my heart racing with indignation. "You're the last person I want to hear from. Please, just listen. We can work through this," Scott pleaded. "My parents have been talking to me about you, and I realize I made a mistake. I should have never listened to them. I just want a chance to make things right." I felt a wave of anger crash over me. Make things right? After all this time? You think I'm just going to let you back into my life because you suddenly have regrets? You left me when I was at my lowest. You chose them over me. There was a pause on the other end of the line, and I could almost hear him processing my words. "I know I hurt you," he finally admitted, his voice heavy with remorse. "But I've changed. I want to be part of your life again. I want to be a father to Emma." My heart sank at his words. The very idea of Scott wanting to be in my life again felt surreal. I had spent so long rebuilding myself, learning to stand on my own 2 feet without him. Yet, a part of me wondered if I could allow myself to believe that maybe, just maybe, he had truly changed. "Your parents are right here, and they want to talk to you," Scott continued, his voice softening. "Please, just give us a chance." I hesitated, torn between the desire to protect myself and the glimmer of hope that maybe they could be part of my life again. But then I remembered all the hurt, all the pain, and the loneliness that had come from their rejection. "No, Scott," I said firmly, my voice steady. "I've spent 3 years healing, and I'm not going to let you or anyone else undo all that work. I'm happy now. and I'm not going back to the way things were. You made your choice, and now you have to live with it." With that, I hung up the phone, my heart racing. I didn't know what would come next, but I felt a sense of relief wash over me. I had stood my ground, and that was enough for now. Over the next few days, I focused on Emma, pouring my love into her and cherishing every moment we spent together. I read her stories, sang to her, and watched her giggle as she discovered the world around her. She was everything to me. As I sat on the couch, the weight of my past crashing down around me, I stared blankly at the wall. The call from Scott had rattled me more than I cared to admit. Despite my determination to move forward and keep my distance from my parents and ex-husband, hearing his voice had stirred a storm of emotions I thought I had buried. I took a deep breath and reminded myself that I had chosen to cut them out of my life for a reason. Their rejection during my darkest moments had been unbearable, and I wasn't about to let their attempts at re-entry shake my resolve. I remembered the day I had learned of my infertility, how I had felt like a shadow in my own life, a ghost wandering through the world while everyone around me seemed to be living, thriving, and expecting. My parents' disappointment had cut deep, and in their eyes, I had become less of a daughter and more of a failed promise. As my thoughts spiraled, I pulled out my phone, needing to make it clear to Scott that I wouldn't tolerate any further intrusion into my life. I dialed his number, and when he answered, I wasted no time. "Scott, don't ever call me again," I said, my voice steady but firm. "If you do, I'll be forced to take legal action. I don't want to go down that road, but I will if you don't respect my boundaries." "Wait, just hear me out," he pleaded, his tone desperate. "Why? So you can try to gaslight me into believing you care?" "I don't buy it, Scott," I shot back, my heart pounding. "I'm done with you. I've been done for 3 years, and I'm sticking to it." But he persisted, and against my better judgment, I listened. "I know I messed up, and so did my parents," he said slowly, his voice heavy with regret. "It's just, we were all so disappointed. We were looking forward to starting a family together, and when you told us you were infertile, it was hard for everyone to process." His words struck a nerve. The raw pain of that time flooded back to me, the looks of disappointment on their faces, the way they had treated me like a burden. I had felt so alone, so abandoned, and now Scott was trying to rewrite history. "I'm sorry it was hard for you," I said, my tone dripping with sarcasm. "But this was my life we were talking about. My heart was shattered, and you all treated me like I was the one to blame. You're not the victim here. Please, just listen. My parents and I want to make things right," he continued, trying to salvage the conversation. "We've had time to think, and we realize how we handled everything was wrong. We'd like a second chance." I could hear my parents chiming in the background, their voices laced with the same insincerity that had hurt me before. "This is exactly why we had to cut you off," they echoed. "You were so selfish when you found out you were infertile. You kept demanding attention and comfort while we were all dealing with our own pain. You pushed us away." Their accusations hit like a blow, and for a moment, I felt my defenses start to waver. Was it possible that I had been too self-centered? Had I been too needy during that tumultuous time? Doubt crept in, but I quickly brushed it aside. I knew they were trying to manipulate me, trying to shift the blame onto me for their failures as parents. "No," I replied, my voice steady. "What you did was cruel. You abandoned me when I needed support. You think I chose this life? I didn't want to be infertile. I wanted a family just as much as you did. But instead, I was met with shame and disappointment from my own parents. So don't sit there and pretend this is my fault." The silence on the other end was palpable. I could sense Scott and my parents exchanging looks, the reality of their choices settling in. "You don't have to be this way," Scott implored, his tone shifting to a softer pitch. "We can work through this. I know it won't be easy, but I want to be there for you and Emma." But I was done. I could feel the heat rising in my chest, anger bubbling over. "No, I don't want anything from you. I don't want you in my life or my daughter's life. You're all the same trying to paint me as the villain when you're the ones who have hurt me. You're not worth my time." Before they could respond, I hung up the phone, feeling both liberated and exhausted. The confrontation had drained me, but I felt a sense of relief. I had taken a stand, and that was a victory in itself. Yet, as I sat in silence, I could still feel the gnawing doubts creeping in. Maybe I had been selfish. Maybe I had been too demanding. I pulled out my phone again, this time scrolling through my contacts until I landed on Ida's name. She was a friend from college, someone who had stood by me through thick and thin, and I needed her reassurance. I sent her a quick message. "Hey, can we talk? I really need some advice right now." Within moments, my phone buzzed with her reply. "Of course. Come over whenever you're free. I'll make tea." I smiled, grateful for her unwavering support. I packed a few things for Emma and headed over to Ida's place, hoping that some time with a friend would help clear my mind. When I arrived, Ida welcomed me with open arms, taking Emma from my arms and bouncing her gently. "Look at this little cutie. How are you holding up?" she asked, concern etched on her face. "I don't know," I admitted, sinking onto the couch. "I just had another awful conversation with Scott and my parents. They're trying to manipulate me into forgiving them, and I don't know if I'm being too harsh." Ida shook her head, her expression firm. "You're not being harsh at all. They hurt you deeply, and it's okay to stand your ground. You've come so far. Don't let them back in just because they're suddenly interested in your life again." "But what if I was selfish?" I countered, my voice wavering. "What if I was too focused on my own pain to see theirs? Maybe I pushed them away." Ida frowned, her brow furrowing. "You were dealing with your own trauma. You had every right to feel hurt and angry. They didn't support you when you needed them. You're not responsible for their feelings, especially when they've treated you poorly." Her words helped to ease the burden on my heart, and I felt a flicker of confidence return. "You're right. I shouldn't have to feel guilty for wanting to protect myself and my daughter." "Exactly," Ida beamed, taking a seat beside me. "You've worked hard to create a new life for yourself. Embrace that strength." We spent the next few hours talking, laughing, and enjoying the sweet moments of motherhood. Emma gurgled and cooed, oblivious to the tumult of emotions swirling around her. I watched her smile, and my heart swelled with pride. She was my world, my everything. Later that evening, as I returned home, I felt more grounded. I had made my decision. I would not entertain Scott or my parents any longer. I would protect my daughter and myself, no matter the cost. Days turned into weeks, and I fell into a comfortable routine. I spent my days caring for Emma and managing the challenges of motherhood, while the nights were filled with quiet reflection. Yet, the peace I had found was shattered one afternoon when I received an alarming call from my nanny. "Hey, I'm sorry to bother you, but Scott is here. He's been shouting for you outside, and I don't think it's safe for us to stay in your house." Panic surged through me, and I felt my heart race. "What do you mean he's shouting? Is Emma okay?" "Yes, she's fine," my nanny assured me. "But he seems really agitated. I think you should call the police." Without hesitating, I dialed 911, my hands trembling as I reported the situation. I instructed my nanny to take Emma out the back door and walk to her home, which was just a few blocks away. I knew I couldn't let Scott near her, not after everything that had happened. "Please, stay safe," I urged her, anxiety knotting my stomach. "I'll handle this." Once the call was done, I rushed home, my heart pounding as I envisioned Scott's face twisted with anger. What had happened to him? The man I had known was now a shadow of himself, spiraling into chaos. When I arrived, the police were already there, their presence a welcome sight. As I stepped out of the car, I could see Scott pacing outside my door, his fists clenched and face flushed. It was clear he had been drinking. It was just past noon, and he looked disheveled, as if he hadn't slept in days. "Where is she?" he shouted, his voice hoarse. "Let me in. I just want to talk." "Scott, you need to leave," I shouted back, standing my ground. "You can't just come here and scream like this. You're scaring me." The officers stepped in front of me, their stance firm as they approached Scott. "Sir, we need you to calm down and step away from the property. We've received a call regarding your behavior." Scott turned to the officers, his expression a mix of anger and desperation. "I just want to see my daughter. I need to talk to her." "Enough," one of the officers barked, his voice booming. "You're not allowed on this property. If you don't comply, we'll have to arrest you." Scott's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, I feared he might lash out. But then, he seemed to deflate, the fight leaving his body as he staggered backward. "Fine," he spat, his voice dripping with bitterness. "You'll regret this. I'll make sure of it." As the officers guided him away, I felt a mix of relief and anger. He had crossed a line, and now it was time to take action. I made the decision to press charges, not just for the sake of justice, but for my own safety. With the police handling the situation, I took a moment to breathe. My nanny returned shortly after, bringing Emma with her. I scooped my daughter into my arms, my heart racing as I felt her warmth against me. "You're safe now, sweetheart," I whispered, kissing her forehead. "I won't let anyone hurt you." The days that followed were a blur of paperwork, police reports, and the emotional toll of it all. But I knew I had made the right choice. I filed for a restraining order against Scott, determined to protect my daughter at all costs. Weeks passed, and life slowly began to settle into a new normal. I found solace in the rhythm of motherhood, and Emma thrived in our little bubble. I was grateful for the support of my friends, especially Aita, who had been my rock through the chaos. Yet, my parents had not given up. They continued to try and reach out, sending messages filled with guilt and pleas for forgiveness. I ignored every one of them, determined to maintain my distance. I had chosen to break free from their manipulation, and I refused to allow them back into my life. Then one day, I received a call from my ex-in-laws. The last time I had spoken to them had been during the turmoil of my divorce, and I hadn't kept in touch since. "Hello?" I answered cautiously. "Hi, it's me, Karen," Scott's mom said, her voice softer than I remembered. "We've heard about everything that happened, and we wanted to reach out. We're truly sorry for how things turned out." I took a moment to process her words, surprised by the sincerity in her voice. "Thank you for calling, but I'm not sure what else there is to say. Scott made his choices, and I need to focus on my daughter." "I understand that," she replied gently. "But we've spoken to him since the incident, and he's not doing well. He's struggling, and it's hard for us to watch. We just want you to know that we're here for you, and we don't condone his actions." Her words struck a chord. I had seen how Scott's behavior had spiraled out of control, but part of me still couldn't shake the anger I felt toward them. I appreciate your concern, but I have to protect myself and Emma. I don't want any part of this situation. Of course, I completely understand. But I also want you to know that we care about you and your daughter. You're part of our family too, and we don't want to lose that connection, Karen said, her voice breaking slightly. I felt a flicker of warmth at her words. It was strange to hear her say that, considering how things had ended between us. But I wasn't ready to forgive or forget so easily. I need time, I replied, my voice steady. Please respect my boundaries. Absolutely. Take all the time you need. We're here if you ever want to talk, she assured me before ending the call. As I hung up, I felt a whirlwind of emotions. Maybe there was a chance for a relationship with my ex-in-laws, but it would take time. I had to process everything that had happened, and I wasn't sure if I was ready for that yet. Eventually, life found its rhythm again. Emma was growing, her little personality shining brighter every day. I spent my time nurturing her and finding joy in our shared moments. I decided to take on a new project at work, one that had been brewing in my mind for a while. I had always loved writing, and now seemed like the perfect opportunity to channel my energy into something positive. As I poured my heart into the project, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. I was determined to create a life filled with love and positivity for my daughter. No longer would I allow my past to dictate my future. I was a survivor, and I would be a better parent than my own ever were. Then came the moment I had both anticipated and dreaded. The day I finally went back to work after my maternity leave. I was excited but nervous, wondering how I would balance everything. But when I arrived at the office, I was met with warm smiles and supportive colleagues, reminding me that I was not alone in this journey. I settled into my routine, taking each day as it came. My coworkers were understanding, and I felt grateful for the flexibility my company offered. I knew I could manage my responsibilities while still being the devoted mother Emma deserved. One afternoon, as I was working on my project, I received another phone call from my nanny. I just wanted to let you know that everything is okay, but Scott is here again, she said, her voice laced with concern. He's been hanging around the neighborhood. Are you serious? I felt my heart drop. I thought the restraining order would keep him away. I don't think he's violating it yet, but I just wanted you to be aware. He seems different. My heart raced as I processed her words. I'll call the police again. Thank you for looking out for us. I felt a renewed sense of determination wash over me. Scott would not break my spirit. As the days turned into weeks, Scott's behavior became more erratic. My ex-in-laws informed me that he was struggling to cope with the aftermath of our separation and the choices he had made. They expressed concern for his well-being, but I remained resolute. I had my daughter to think about, and I would not expose her to his instability. Eventually, the police were able to apprehend Scott again after he was spotted loitering near my home. I felt a sense of relief wash over me when they informed me he would be held for further questioning. The last thing I wanted was for him to come near my daughter or me. While I was busy with the legalities and ensuring our safety, my parents continued to reach out, desperate for reconciliation. I ignored their messages, feeling stronger with each passing day. I was reclaiming my life, and I would not let them back in. As time went on, my focus shifted to what truly mattered, my daughter and our future. I was determined to be a loving and nurturing mother, breaking the cycle of pain that had plagued my own upbringing. I would be the parent I had always needed, and with every decision I made, I felt more empowered. Weeks turned into months, and finally, I was able to take a step back and reflect on everything that had happened. My ex-in-laws had reached out once more, this time with a heartfelt apology and an invitation to meet for coffee. I hesitated, torn between anger and a flicker of hope. Eventually, I agreed to meet them, knowing that I had to confront the past to truly move forward. When I arrived at the coffee shop, I found them seated at a table, their expressions a mix of apprehension and sincerity. "Thank you for meeting with us," Karen said, her voice warm. "We want you to know how deeply sorry we are for everything that happened between us." I nodded, my heart racing as I listened to them explain how they had come to realize their mistakes. They shared stories of Scott's struggles and their own feelings of helplessness during our tumultuous relationship. "I wish we had been more supportive," Karen continued, her eyes filled with remorse. "We should have been there for you, but we let our own fears and disappointments cloud our judgment." As I listened, I felt a mixture of emotions: anger, sadness, and the faintest glimmer of hope. "It hurt," I admitted. "It hurt to feel abandoned when I needed you the most." "I know," she replied softly, "and we want to do better. We want to be part of your life and Emma's life, if you'll let us." It was a difficult decision, and I felt the weight of my past bearing down on me. But as I looked into their eyes, I sensed their sincerity. Perhaps, just perhaps, there was a chance for reconciliation. I didn't have to let go of my anger entirely, but I could choose to move forward. "Let's take it slow," I finally said, my voice steady. "I need time, but I'm willing to see where this leads." They smiled, a flicker of hope igniting in their expressions. "Thank you. We promise to respect your boundaries and take this one step at a time." And so, I found myself standing at a crossroads. I had fought so hard to reclaim my life and protect my daughter, but now I was learning to navigate the complexities of forgiveness and healing. I could still be a better parent than my own, but I could also choose to let others into my life slowly, carefully, and with intention. As I drove home that day, I felt lighter, the burdens of the past beginning to lift. I was still cautious, but I knew I was on a path toward a brighter future, one filled with love, resilience, and the promise of a new beginning for both me and my daughter.